Thank you. Right. Good afternoon to one and all. This is already, I told you, myself, DNS Bhaskar, who is handling with the subject that is financial services. Already, this is the third class we are dealing with that. And in the last two classes already, we have clearly explained about the various aspects relating to financial services and what is the role of financial services in that. What are the various types of financial services? Then we have given about the introduction aspect relating to fund-based financial services, then fees-based financial services and all. Then in the first class already, as I told you, fund-based financial services, unit number one. Then in the second class, I have given a brief summary about the unit number two, that is unit number two, that is fund-based financial services. Then the unit number three, I have given about the various aspects relating to various aspects that are relating to fees-based financial services. So, what are the various differences that are all explained in that? That is the end of the block one. Actually, in the block two, we have given introduction about the various aspects related to the leasing factors. That is loan, leasing, and how are this particular process of leasing and all. Leasing, high purchasing, venture capital. The three important aspects what we have to study in the case of the unit block 2. The block 2 is basically concentrating upon the block 2 is basically concentrate upon three basic factors, that is the leasing, hire purchase, and venture capital. When we talk about the process of leasing, what is leasing? What are the factors influencing leasing? What is meant by lease, rental, and so on and so forth? Lease agreement, lease parties, all these factors that will be considered in this particular situation. When we talk about leasing, first we understand what is the basic meaning of this. This is unit number 4. Remember carefully, as the non-direct participants are there in the class right now. I request all of you, those who are following in the YouTube, try to understand about this is unit 4, which is talking about leasing process, leasing. Then, in the case, actually, what is the meaning of lease? This is a general, very general term. Normally, we have taken lease. And actually, without knowing the technical meaning of lease, we are using this particular leasing concept very popularly. Then, in the case of leasing, the para number 4.2, paragraph number 4.2 para, it is clearly mentioned about the process of leasing. A lease is an agreement. Actually, this is between the two parties. One is said to be lessee and lessor. This concept is briefly discussed in the previous class, but in this particular class, let us complete about the another two aspects also. So let me just come out with that lease aspect. Then I will discuss about the hire purchase. Then we will go for the other important aspect, that is venture capital. With that, two blocks will be complete for your course. So this is the outline for today's class. So first, let us talk about 15 minutes, 10 to 10 minutes about leasing, then another 15 minutes about the hire purchase system, and another 15 minutes we can go with the various aspects related to venture capital. So when we are talking about lease, two parties are there for that. One is a lessee, L-E-S-S-E-Y, L-E-S-S-E, then lessee, then L-E-S-S-E-E, L-E-S-S-E-E, lessee. And this is already a known terminology for you because you have done with the lessee and lessor in case of hire purchase agreements also, hire purchase accounts also. So lessee is the person who is a holder of the right, who is having the right to use the particular product. Then agreement is with him, and whatever the agreement that is entered into between the person, between the person lessee and lessor, that will be considered as the lessee and lessor, that will be considered as the lease agreement. When we talk about that, is called as the lease agreement. So who is a lessor then? Lessor is actually the owner of the asset. So he will provide the financial assistance or provide the technical assistance, or he will provide the machine or provide the any sort of land for the purpose of leasing and all. So whatever the asset he is provided, the provider of the asset is considered as a lessor, and the person who is using the asset for his benefit, that is called as a lessee. And whatever the agreement between these two parties, that is called as a lessee and lessor, that is called as lease agreement. When we go with that, that is considered to be lease agreement, LEASE, lease agreement. When we talk about the lease agreement, then lease agreement. This agreement is binding upon both the parties, that is both lessee as well as the lessor. Now, in what are the various areas in which we can use this particular leasing system? Normally, this leasing system is used for the purpose of mining, then various aspects relating to then other aspects, that is properties which are held for that, or any special equipment which is which is difficult to buy by the every individual normal business person. So when a person is taking it any asset on the lease, he is binded by the responsibility to pay a lease rental to the lessor. So that is one. Then, so when we talk about the process of lease agreements also, then we come to the essential elements of the leasing process. When it is considered to be essential element for the lease contract. When we talk about the lease contract, when we talk about the lease contract in such a case, then what are the various when an essential elements? What are the essential elements of the leasing process? That is given in para number 4.3. In that, the first is party to the contract. Now let me share the screen, or let us proceed for the wait for the another 1-2 minutes. Then parties to the contract. When we are talking about the leasing process or essential elements of the lease, then parties to the contract. Who are the parties to the contract basically? That is called as a, as we talked about, that is called as a lessee and lessor are the parties. If any mediator is there, that will come into that act. Then second important term, that is essential element of the leasing contract, is that asset. What is the asset is there in that? Which asset is considered for the purpose of leasing activity? And whether that particular asset is for the purpose of, whether the purpose, what for the purpose of using that particular asset, that is also to be considered. Asset is basically the subject matter of the lease agreement process. It is subject matter, whether it may be plant, or it may be machinery, or it may be land, or it may be building. So normally, when we go with that leasing process, we fear the word lease with the help of mines, well, exploration of mines, coal mines, oil refineries, etc. Then second is that machine is taken on lease, like trucks, pulverizers, etc. Very high costly equipment. They are not purchased by all individuals, but they are taken out for the lease for the particular period. Say, for example, 5 years lease, 6 years lease, or sometimes it is 50 years lease and all. So in this process, asset is taken for the lease process for a specific period of time. That is another. Asset must have the life of that. That is an important point, what we normally talk about in the case of the lease period. Then consideration. When we talk about the consideration, the right to use the asset is always governed by the compensation to the lessor. Unless, as we know very well, unless there is a consideration, the contract is not valid. In this process, we normally come across that. So when it is not valid. So in this process of lease agreement also, there is a valid consideration is to be passed on to the lessor from the lessee. Then only it is valid. Lease rentals are decided. These lease rentals are itself as a consideration for the these lease rentals are itself as a consideration for the lessor. So in this process, a taken up by the lessor, and lessee will use it to pay for that. Then lastly, we go come just 1 second. Yeah. When we are talking about the lease period is a contract is usually leased for a specific period of time. Either it is a fixed period, or it may be a floating period, or as for the life of the asset also it can be. So how much, for how many number of years that agreement is valid between the lessor and lessee, that is considered as a lease period. That is called as a lease period. Sometimes, in case of assets which are held for the use of the, which are held for the use of the exploration of oils, exploration of minerals, etc. Normally, the lease is valid till complete extraction of the particular mineral. For example, coal mines. In case of coal mine, entire mine is taken for the lease till the entire coal is extracted from that particular land. Like that lease period is varied depending upon the situation. Then user. User is the person who is basically known as who is using that particular asset, which is normally known as lessee only. Then ownership. In case of ownership of the, in case of in case of ownership of the asset remains with the lessor only during that particular tenure of the time. So these are the ownership. Then termination of the contract according to the process of that, according to the process of according to this process. So according to the process of termination of the contract is enabled, and agreement will be on the basis of the contract only. In general, lease contract may come to the end after the expiry of the agreement period by the both the parties. So it has then last one important aspect is that is said to be depreciation. When we are talking about depreciation, this is accounting term which is known to that. And the one peculiarity of this leasing is that the lessor is entitled to claim for the depreciation process. So these are the important features and characteristics of the leasing process. There are basically two types of leases are there. This will share with the through PPT process. Then you can understand them better. I hope you're all able to see this one. Yes. When we are talking about the types of leasing process, then is financial lease, operating lease. So when we talk about financial leasing and operational leasing aspect, financial lease is basically for the purpose of financial lease is basically for the purpose of providing the asset at the total consideration process. When we are talking about, and there are four types of financial leases. Financial lease is basically for the sale and lease back, then leverage lease, full and non-payment lease, and cross-border lease. When a particular asset is given, when a particular asset is taken for that, then we buy the asset for the purpose of giving it to the lease. And the second one is a leverage lease. In the case of leverage lease, all the process is done. Then in the case of lessor will take the funds for that. And then the lessor will take the funds from the other person. And on the basis of that, they will provide the machine or equipment. In the case of this one, 80% of the funds will be taken in that, right? These are the important aspects in that. Then coming to the operating lease. When we talk about operating lease, the ownership is itself with the lessor only, and whereas they are entitled for the only for purpose of usage of this. And in the paragraph number 4.7, page number 53, there are two differences are given for the two types of leases, that is financial lease and operational lease. This is a very, very important aspect what every student has to understand about, right? So these are the important points you have to understand and remember. Then let us go with the two aspects on this. Then just let me. When we talk about this differences between options between optional or financial lease, in case of financial lease, option of the ownership transfer at the end of the term is available to the lessee. So the lessee can give an option for that, or else we can go with that. So the lessee or lessor, ownership of the asset remains with the lessor only in case of operational lease, and no transfer of ownership is possible from the lessee to the lessor. The second one is that lease is treated as a loan for the purpose procurement of an asset, whereas ownership will be in the name or will never be in the name of the asset. So then in the case of lease, is treated as a rental basis in the lease rental will appear in that. So, in the long-term lease agreement is a financial lease, whereas short-term agreement is a operational lease. Cancellation of lease agreement is possible with the lessee. In case of financial leases, this is possible for the every lessee to cancel the agreement. Whereas in case of the lessor, he cannot cancel that particular agreement. So, in the other important is that any sort of depreciation, any sort of obsolescence, etc., they can be claimed as an accounting, they can be claimed in the accounting process by the lessor, but whereas the lessee will not have any right over that. But in the case of operating business, so this one. Then the next important is the advantages of leasing process. So in case of advantages of leasing process, normally we come across the permanent, so permit the alternative use of funds. That is one. So when we are talking about the హలో కుమార్ గారు
సార్ చెప్పండి సార్.
అదే మీరు ఎవరు రాలేదు అసలు క్లాస్ లో జీరోగా ఉంది పరిస్థితి.
పనిలో ఉన్నాను.
ఒక్క నిమిషం అలాగే ఉండండి. చేస్తున్నాను. యా రైట్. సో
సార్ చెప్పండి సార్.
చెప్తున్నా ఒక్క నిమిషం. జస్ట్ స్క్రీన్ షాట్ తీసి పెట్టాను అటెండెన్స్, అందుకని చెప్తాను అనమాట. జస్ట్ సెకండ్.
సరే సార్.
అయిపోయింది. జస్ట్ 1 సెకండ్. ఏం సార్ మన వాళ్ళు ఎవరు జాయిన్ అయ్యే ఉద్దేశంలో లేరా అసలు క్లాస్ కి?
సార్ గ్రూప్ లో అయితే పెట్టాను సార్, ఎవరు రావట్లేదు.
చాలా డిసప్పాయింటింగ్ గా ఉంటుందండి. కనీసం యూట్యూబ్ లో ఉంటుంది కరెక్టే, నేను కాదంటలేదు. బట్ యూట్యూబ్ లో ఎవరు వింటారు ఎవరు వింటారు మనకు తెలియదు కదా. అది ఒక్కళ్ళైనా కనీసం రెస్పాన్సివ్ గా ఉంటే బాగుంటుంది. అసలు అంత యూనివర్సిటీ ఎంత ఎఫర్ట్ పెడుతుందో వీటి కోసం ఆన్లైన్ క్లాసెస్ కి. నేను అప్పటికే ఇంకా పారా నంబర్స్ కూడా టైప్ చేసి రాస్తున్నాను ఇక్కడ. సో అట్లీస్ట్ ఫ్యూ స్టూడెంట్స్ ఉంటే బాగుంటుంది. University is taking a lot of strains and pains to conduct all these classes in a very effective way, so that and including
వాయిస్ కట్ అవుతున్నా సార్. సో వాయిస్ బ్రేక్ అవుతున్నది, బ్రేక్ అయిపోయింది.
Next, let us go for the process of hire purchase system. Unit number 5, purchase. Unit number 5, hire purchase system. Actually, when we are talking about this hire purchase system, what exactly is the meaning of hire purchase and how this hire purchase system goes on, and all that is discussed, what are the advantages of hire purchase system that is given in this particular lesson. So when we are talking about hire purchase, the word itself is self-explanatory. We are taking or we are buying or we are taking an asset for the purpose of hire. That's all. So any asset that is taken or given for the purpose of hire, that will come under this particular process. Acquiring an asset with the help of the vendor from the vendor who is called as a hire vendor, and that process of asset is done to the hire vendee, that is to be hire purchaser, actually hire vendee, and between there an agreement between the two parties, that is considered as a hire purchase agreement. So in the process of hire purchase equipment, for that across the world, this hire purchase agreement system is going on. This is financing of the hire vendor. So hire vendor will procure a particular asset, and he will procure the asset, and then finally he will take up that particular asset further, and he will enter into an agreement with the person who is required to use that particular asset. And for the purpose of using that particular asset, the hire vendee or hire purchaser will pay some amount of that. So in the case of hire purchase amount, so when the first for hire purchase for using this particular hire purchase asset, the hire purchaser or vendee, he will take the asset into his use, and as a process, as a consideration for that, he will pay hire purchase installment amount or hire purchase amount. That is considered hire purchase rental, hire rental it is called. High rental, there are basically two sub-component parts in that. One is interest part, second one is that a cost of the asset, also price of the asset is included. The main philosophy of the high purchase system is that when a person is not able to buy that asset on his own, that asset will be first given to the hire vendee or hire purchaser for his use, and for a certain period of time it is used. And then when once the total amount is paid, or total installment amount is paid, or lump sum amount is paid, then he will the asset will be transferred to the hire vendee. So in this process, actually three people are clearly involved in that. One is a hire vendor, second is a hire vendee, third one is a hire purchaser, hire purchase agreement. So these three terms are they must be able to understand. Then coming to the another one. So in the case of hire purchase agreement, actually there are two types of hire purchase systems are there in that. What are the two systems? Let us go with the screen share. And what are the two basic? Two types of hire purchase system. So that is I'm sharing. One is a consumer hire purchase system. Another is the industrial hire purchase system. When we talk about consumer hire purchase system, all the seller will go with the seller will go with the hire purchase system, and the buyer will pay lease hire rentals every month or every quarterly. That these consumer goods which are set for this particular purpose is considered as the basis of the consumer hire purchase system. Second one, industrial hire purchase system. That is basically the upgradation of that particular equipment. So in case of industrial goods, if this hire purchase system is used, then it is called as industrial hire purchase system. Then, so if a consumer goods, like we buy the cars from two-wheelers, etc. on installment basis. Normally, we, in general terms, we use it as a just installment basis, but it is not right. When we are talking about hire purchase system, we should know what is the difference between leasing and hire purchasing. When we talk about the difference between leasing and hire purchasing system, we already now discussed about lease system. In case of lease system, lease lessee cannot claim the allowances or taxes, etc., or depreciation in his books of accounts. Whereas in case of hire purchase system, the hirer or the person hire purchaser, the person who is using the asset, can claim allowances like tax shields, depreciation, investment allowance, etc., in the books of accounts. Then, in the case of the lease agreement, the option is not there for the person to buy the asset on his own. Whereas in case of the hire purchase agreement system, there is an option, not only option, this almost all, the every hire purchase system, the system itself says that at the end of the payment of the final hire purchase amount, the asset will be transferred to the hire purchaser. And lease rentals is taxable and it is deductible, whereas interest component is only taxable in case of the hire purchase system. So salvage value of the asset is there in case of the leasing system with the lessor only. That means if any residual value of the asset is there, the residual value is enjoyed by the lessor in him, whereas in the case of hire purchase system, the hirer will lose that, but the hirer can enjoy, whereas salvage value cannot be enjoyed by the lessor. So these rentals comprises of two main important aspects. One is interest component, another one is a capital component. So these are the various important aspects in that. Then in case of hire purchase installment system, that comprises of three basic important elements. One is the three important aspects in that. One is have to be the profit component, interest part, and recovery part. These are the various differences between the hire purchase system and installment purchase system. Then you can understand about what is the difference between hire purchase and we now discussed about lease. So when we are talking about the differences between hire purchase system and installment purchase system, so this is given in para 5.7 in that. So the title of the asset is the installment is given clearly in the process of that. Installment purchase is at the instance of the agreement, whereas the title of the asset will be transferred to the hire vendee at the times of the term contract. Whereas in case of the hire purchase system, till the last installment is paid, till the last amount is paid, the asset is held up with the owner only. Whereas in case of installment purchase system, at the very beginning itself, the asset will be in the hands of the buyer or the installment purchase hire vendee. And in both the cases, the risk of the rewards on the asset that lies on the hands of the purchaser, and in case of installment system. In case of installment system, The higher purchase risk, rewards, etc., will not be guaranteed for that. Then another important part, in case of installment purchase system, the parties are donated as a denominated as a are denoted as a buyer and seller, whereas in case of hire purchase, the parties are denoted as the hire vendor and hire vending. So in case of default by the buyer, the recovery in case of the recovery is in case of recovery of the asset will need to be transferred to the title of this. In case of hire system, the title will be with the vendor till the last paisa is paid to the person. There could be necessity of the down payment in case of agreement, whereas there is no necessity in case of the hire purchase system in that. So these 9 points are given in that. And with that, we completed about the unit number 5, that is hire purchase system process, right? So last one of this particular block, that is called as a venture capital. So, what is exactly the meaning of venture capital and what are the various features of venture capital? This is the most important element. Financing of high-end technology-based projects, which involves the risk element in that. This is given in paragraph number 6.1 so that you can understand very clearly. Financing of high technology projects. So, how this particular this process will go on, let us understand. And this is another way of taking care of the requirements of the person who is in need of the finance. So, meaning of venture capital, it is a financing of high risk technology oriented project, which involves risk, but at the same time has a strong potentiality for the growth. In certain projects, they may be having huge capital requirements and their success is not guaranteed. Their success is not guaranteed. In such a case, whenever it is given, so the risk is very high. If the project is success, it go to the highest amount of benefits, whereas if the project is failure, it leads to the very heaviest amount of losses. In case of technology is accepted, a technology is successful, then the project will be very successful. The word venture we use in case of the real estate business in nowadays, but at the same time, this is not only accepted, there is accepted terminology that is venture may be for venture may be used for any of the item that is involved with the high risk element. So then we go with the venture capital is defined as equity support provided. In the case of venture capital system, what is going to be done in the case of? In case of venture capital system, we normally provide the equity capital assistance for the support of the funds of the new concepts that involves high risk and at the same time very high growth and high potentiality will be there in that. Then the features of the venture capital system. In the case of features of the venture capital system, high degree of risk will be there. As we all know, the venture capital is itself named against the high risk project. So risk of accepting the project, risk of financing the project, risk of making it success, all these are high risk only. Then equity participation will be there. What is meant by equity participation? When any objective of venture capitalist is to invest in any of the company and whenever the share prices increase, then he will try to make up the capital benefit out of that or capital profits out of that. So what has happened here? So any person who wants to provide venture capital for any of the startup companies, first he will invest in lump sum, and he will wait for the shares and hit a high rate and high profit, and he will come out of that. So in the case of equity participation, it is possible for an individual to go with the high price and equity share participation. Third one is that long-term investment process. This long-term investment process is that venture capital system is always go with the longer gestation period. That means to understand whether a project is successful or not, that requires a longer period of time. And then, so unless and until it is a waiting time is more, it cannot give any sort of benefits. Not like that, just manufacturing process, it will come out with the products within 6 months or so. But in case of venture capital system, this venture capital will give some sort of benefits only through the process of waiting time. And finally, when once venture is successful or the project is successful, then it will give huge amounts of profits. Then participation in the management. Almost all venture capitalist is the person who is providing the finance to any small scale business enterprise, which is in the setup of venture capital. He will participate in the managerial decision making process altogether and achieving the social objective. So venture capital organizations, they are held for the purpose of developing the process of a social obligation. So this is possible from the venture capital players, generate employment, generate social obligations, complete this one, and indirectly they will encourage entrepreneurship also through the venture capital. Investment is liquid. Investment is liquid. When we are talking about investment, so when we put more amount of the venture capitalists will pump the so much of capital into the business aspect. Then last one, opportunity for the research and development. So when you are going for the research, say for example, a new machine or a new missile or any new product, there is no guarantee that it will become successful. So, but unless you try, it is not possible to bring out any sort of new equipment or so. This process is said to be possible only with the help of the venture capital. Unless you go with the risk factor, if you are thinking about whether the project is successful or not, if the project goes wrong, what happens? If you are, as long as you are thinking about that, it is not possible to decide. If you put the money in that, test it, do it, finally go for the marketing process, then only it is possible. So, if for the purpose of research and development activities, this venture capital system is always suitable. So, these are the most important elements in that. And another one that is called as important service. Then, what are the various modes of venture capital financing? This is a important aspect in that. So you can understand it is given paragraph number 6.6, the various stages that are there in that. In the case of venture capital system, what are the various stages in that? The stages that are said to be, the various stages that are said to be, that is, one is the seed capital assistance. That means in the very beginning of the very beginning of this particular venture capital or business, when the business is already started up, then only we can provide the venture capital. There is second level of fund. This is called the second level of financing or funding. Sometimes the venture capitalist may come with the seed capital. That means very beginning, just idea generation itself. He will come up with the aspect. Second one, if the idea generation is already done by an entrepreneur, but he is suffering with the problem of financing for purpose of implementing this decision. That is called the startup finance. Whether you can finance in the seed level or the venture capitalist can provide finances at the time of startup or then first round financing. When once second startup stage is also complete, new firms came into existence, but they are not able to pick up to the required level. then first round financing. In the same way, second round financing, third round financing, fourth round financing, all these things will be taken care of in the stages of investing. Then lastly, what are the various factors? This is given paragraph number 6.7. Then given paragraph number 6.7, when we are talking about the para 6.7, it is given what are the various factors that are investing decision. That is strong management team should be there. The strong management team should be there. Without that, it is not possible. If the management itself worried about losing the money or taking the risk at all, then venture capital system does not work out. Then second one is a viable idea. Vague ideas and which are not properly screened, they will give a definite failure. So any idea that must be clearly thought out. It must be viable in nature. That must be implementable. Then third one is that business plan. So a perfect business plan will give a road for the success. So in this process, the venture capitalist should go with the business plan. Project cost and project returns. So how much is the project cost? How much is the return on the particular project? Both must be identified and both must be compared, and then only it should be financed. And lastly, future market prospects are to be identified and existing technology is to be considered and others. And lastest topic in this particular venture capital system and this block also, that is called a selection of venture capitalists. That is hands-on, hands-off nurturing. So that is dealing, structuring, flexibility, exit aspirations, fund viability and liquidity, track record, and fund of it. How you can decide a venture capitalist. So these aspects are to be studied in the paragraph number 6.8. So what to set, how to set a venture capitalist. So the entire process of venture capitalism in brief nutshell, I can tell you in simple way. So actually, what is the meaning of venture capital? That is financing a very high risky project. If the risk project may be successful, project may not be successful. If you are doing some sort of research, whether the outcome is successful or not, you don't. Then investment in that type of projects is done in by the venture capital organization. And lastly, when a venture capitalist come with that, so he will think about whether this particular idea will become a successful or not. So at the depending on the stage of the entrepreneur, here entrepreneur is the person who is doing the business, venture capitalist is the person who is providing finance, and so on and so forth. Like the different persons will be included. And at the last stage, at what stage the venture capitalist is going to provide the finance, that is very, very essential element of that. Whether it is seed capital assistance or it is first round financing or startup financing, all these aspects you must be able to understand. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is the end of the second block actually. And I thought of giving the third block in introduction also, but no direct participant here. Of course, you might be listening through YouTube video, but I sincerely advise the students to be at least a part of the class. Thank you. Thank you.